to make a profit, to keep in business. Therefore my job, important, simple, lengthy, and of course quite dangerous. Now, most of you saw me put gold here in the furnace. It's the only piece we have, so that's why we keep using it all the time. But it needs about 6 minutes to be prepared. So we fill in this time by explaining about how we get our gold and what we do with it. If I'm going to do that, I do have to set the scene. You see, at this very moment, what you're experiencing is the third and final stage of mining on the Ballarat. It is called quartz mining. This sort of mining was done by large mining companies, and the date would be roughly about 1860, 1880, around that time. These large mining companies look for gold for one very good reason. They know they're going to find it. Unfortunately for them, they also know to find this gold, I should say, it's not going to be found by itself, but in huge walls of rock made up of this particular rock called quartz, hence that quartz mining. To find these large layers, we know we have to dig roughly about 300 feet into the ground to do so. Because hopefully there were several layers, we will keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper, exhausting those reefs. We got to a depth of just over 3,000 feet, so we've worked a kilometre into the ground searching for this gold. But of course, once we found these huge walls, we have to get that rock to the surface. If they're huge walls of rock and go on for miles, we just can't bring them up in one go, can we? We have to blast the large walls with dynamite, simply to make them into small pieces like this. These pieces were brought to the surface, but then again, a huge problem. Quartz is an extremely hard material, and if the gold is embedded in that rock, we have to crush this rock to get the gold out. And we do so. We do that in that building next door. It's called a battery house, simply because in there are batteries of large metal hammers that will crush this rock, turning it into a powder such as that. That dirt is washed over the tables that you see in the battery house, and simply by doing that, is the method that we use to get our gold. But unfortunately, we don't get much gold. But to get all of the gold out of that dirt, as we must, so we're profitable, what we're going to have to use is, well, I suppose we'll just call it something else. It is rather unusual what we use. First of all, it's a silver liquid, but even though it's a liquid, it is also a metal. It is called mercury, and the reason we use it is because we know that gold and mercury are what is termed to be chemically pure. It's quite easy to use. We take off the lid, place the amalgam in the bowl, we seal the lid shut, we put this into a fire. Because mercury has a low melting point, it will melt and boil before the gold. As it boils, it creates mercury vapours. Up they come, out through the tube, and that of course separates the tube. A very simple process, but rather dangerous because the mercury vapours coming out of this tube are also a poisonous gas. And I can assure you, if I happen to breathe those gases, I know that two things will happen. The first is I'll go more insane than I already am. Secondly, I will die. And of course, not wanting that to happen, we do have to solve that problem. Simple solution, put the end of this tube into a bucket of water. The water will cool the mercury vapour, taking it back to that silver liquid we started with. And because it's heavy, the mercury simply falls into the bottom of the bucket. Of course, what we now have is the gold sitting in the retort all by itself. Unfortunately, it still isn't pure, so I haven't done my job, and that means there is one more thing to do. I now take that very hot piece of gold out of this retort, but simply to place it into another bowl, which is called a crucible. And this is what I have. It's a bowl made out of clay and graphite. To this I will add flux, a powder substance. Placing all of that into the furnace is when I start to smelt. However, smelting is simply melting, isn't it? I know I can melt gold, but to do that I do have to take it to a temperature of 1063 degrees Celsius. I know the impurities mixed in with the gold have a lower melting point, so simply by melting the gold, I am also going to melt those impurities. Why would I bother? It's hard, hot and dangerous work. Well, you see, I know that those impurities are lighter than gold. When we melt everything down, the impurities being lighter will work their way up through the gold to the top. They'll be attracted to the flux and will stick to it, and that will create a crust that floats on top of the gold. We pour the gold out, the crust goes to the back, and that will separate the two. But because we've done that, we have got rid of the impurities, so the gold is now 99.99% pure gold. So I've done my job. Important, simple, lengthy, and of course quite dangerous. Right, now the gold's nearly ready, ladies and gentlemen, but if I might, I would like to test you on the language of the 1880s. Yes, we do speak English. We do so simply because the gold, when it is actually taken out of this furnace, it's going to become solid very quickly. So to give ourselves time, according to this cast iron mould, we will take it to that temperature of 1200 degrees. Now, of course, we're dealing with a hot molten metal, so for your own safety, I do have to ask you not to come any close to what you are at the present moment. That's most important. And I hope you're ready, ladies and gentlemen, because I can see the gold in the furnace. I can see that it is only seconds away, and it is now quite ready. So let's bring this gold out for you to see what we've been talking about. Of course, as you look inside the crucible, this is that 1200 degrees that I was also talking about. And as you can see, it is extremely hot. So hot, in fact, I will point out that I am also feeling the heat on my arm coming off that crucible. And do you think I'm worried about that? Most certainly. I'm worried, ladies and gentlemen, because you see, what you may notice is that I am wearing a flannel shirt and a leather apron. Why I worry? Simply because this is what we call our safety clothing. And if I am feeling the heat on my arm, it's rather obvious that my so-called safety clothing must work all that well. So that's how I do this job for purifying the gold. Also, if that is my story, ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to say that there is one last chapter. Yes, I'm going to keep you here just a bit longer. You see, coming to Sovereign Hill, we do understand that you would realise gold to be a very expensive and precious metal. But gold is also quite different. It does do some amazing things, and that's where the heat's lost all the time too. Also becomes solid rapidly, because if it wasn't solid by now, it'd be going down there and in my arm. And anyhow, it's solid, so there it is for you to see. Just to make sure it's solid. And of course, at 900 degrees, it does have to be just a bit hot. Just the heat coming out of the gold is the only thing setting that stick on fire. Now, of course, if gold is to lose heat, it must have a reason. At this moment, there isn't any, and it will be 2 or 3 hours before I can safely handle this piece of gold. But of course, we don't want to sit around here for 2 or 3 hours. There's other things to see and do, isn't there? So what I'm going to do is hopefully give this gold another reason to lose more heat, simply by placing it into this tub of water. That certainly looks like something. Amazing. Alright, 1200 degrees. That was the temperature I took that gold to. Having poured it into this mould, I then said that temperature